The air was thick with the scent of maple syrup and scrambled eggs as I stood in my kitchen, flipping pancakes while my 12-year-old son, Tyler, scribbled something on a piece of notebook paper at the table. It was Saturday morning, our little sacred time when the outside world slowed down and we got to simply be. I had just poured another cup of coffee and was humming along to an old Fleetwood Mac song playing softly on the Bluetooth speaker when Tyler asked it. "Mom," he said, almost too quietly to be heard over the sizzle of the pan, "can I ask you something personal?" My heart fluttered, just a beat. As a parent, when your kid says something like that, you can't help but brace yourself. I turned off the stove, plated the last pancake, and brought it over to the table. I sat down beside him and tried to keep my voice casual. "Of course, buddy. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose the way he always did when he was nervous or deep in thought. Then, very deliberately, he looked me in the eyes and asked, "Do you think I'm weird?" For a moment, I was stunned into silence. That wasn't what I had expected. My mind had gone to all the classic fears: bullying, puberty, trouble at school. But this hit me differently. He wasn't asking for facts or explanations. He was asking about who he was. About how I saw him. I blinked, trying to find the right words. "Why would you think that?" Tyler shrugged and looked down at his paper. "Some of the kids at school say I talk too much about space stuff. And they say I dress funny 'cause I always wear my NASA hoodie. And I dunno. Sometimes I feel like I'm not like them. Like I'm too much. Or not enough." I reached out and touched his hand. It was warm and a little sticky from syrup. "Honey, I don't think you're weird. I think you're brilliant and curious and passionate. And those are good things. Amazing things. But that's not how they see it," he muttered. Something deep in my chest cracked open at that moment. I remembered being his age. I remembered how cruel middle school could be, how desperate I was to fit in, how I used to hide my books or pretend not to know the answers in class just to avoid standing out. And now, here was my son, bright, beautiful, and full of dreams, and the world was already starting to dim his shine. I didn't know what possessed me, but I suddenly stood up, walked over to the hall closet, and pulled out an old storage bin. Tyler watched, confused, as I dropped it on the table and started digging through it. Inside were photos, journals, ticket stubs, and a crumpled envelope full of letters I had written to myself when I was a teenager. "Ty," I said, pulling out a folded piece of notebook paper that was almost 25 years old, "I want to show you something." He leaned in as I handed it to him. It was a letter I had written when I was 13, titled, "Things I Wish I Could Say." It was filled with all the fears and doubts I had carried at that age. How I wished someone would understand me. How I hated being called too sensitive. How I felt like I didn't belong. As he read, his eyes widened. "You felt like this too?" I nodded. "Exactly like this. And I carried that around for a long time. But you know what I've learned?" He looked up at me. "I've learned that the things that make you different are often the things that make you extraordinary. And sometimes, the world just takes a little while to catch up." He was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, he said, "But it still hurts." I wrapped my arms around him and held him close. "I know it does, sweetheart. And that's okay. You're allowed to feel that. But I promise, you're not alone. And you don't have to change who you are to make other people comfortable." Later that day, we went to the local planetarium. It wasn't planned. It was just something I decided we needed to do. Tyler lit up as soon as we walked through the doors. He rushed to the model of the solar system, pointing out inaccuracies and laughing with joy. I watched him, his eyes shining like twin galaxies, and I thought to myself, this is who he is. And I'll be damned if I ever let the world make him feel small for it. On the way home, he talked non-stop about the stars and the galaxies and dark matter. His voice was alive again, buzzing with excitement. And I didn't say a word to quiet him. In fact, I joined in, asking questions, getting curious, even when I didn't understand half of what he was saying. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table again. I thought about his question. "Do you think I'm weird?" And my reaction. How deeply it had rattled something in me. Not because I was ashamed of his quirks, but because I had spent too long hiding my own. I realized something else that night. Tyler wasn't just looking for reassurance. He was looking for someone to show him it was okay to be fully, unapologetically himself. And in order to do that, I had to be willing to do the same. The next morning, I pulled out an old sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. I used to draw. A lot. But somewhere along the way, between work and motherhood and life, I stopped. I told myself I didn't have time. But really, I just got scared that I wasn't good enough. That it didn't matter. That I was too old or too busy or too whatever. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee and a blank page and started to draw. Tyler came down a little later, rubbing his eyes, and stopped when he saw what I was doing. "You drew that?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, a little sheepishly. "I used to do this all the time." He smiled. "It's really good." I smiled back. "Thanks. I'm trying to get back into it." He nodded, then sat down beside me with a bowl of cereal. "I think that's cool. That you're doing something you love." Those words echoed in my chest. That I'm doing something I love. When did I stop letting myself do that? Over the next few weeks, something shifted in our house. Tyler kept talking about space, but now he was also sketching rockets and building models. He started a science blog, yes, a real one, and I helped him design it. I even drew his logo. It was a little cartoon astronaut with wild hair and big glasses. Just like him. He got teased a few more times at school, sure. But he started responding differently. With more confidence. More humor. He even invited one of the kids who made fun of him to come over and check out his telescope. That kid ended up spending the night, and they've been friends ever since. One evening, a few months later, we were lying in the backyard, looking up at the stars through his telescope. Tyler turned to me and said, "You know what I think? I think we're all a little weird. But that's what makes the universe interesting." I laughed, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I think you're absolutely right." And in that moment, I realized how much I had changed, too. Not just in the way I supported him, but in how I had started showing up for myself. Drawing again. Laughing more. Letting go of all those tight, anxious knots I'd carried since I was a kid trying to fit in. My son's question had caught me off guard. But my reaction, though messy, emotional, a lot, was real. And it was what both of us needed. The truth is, we never stop needing to be seen. To be told that who we are is enough. That we don't have to shrink to be loved. My son reminded me of that. And I'll spend the rest of my life reminding him, too.